It is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Mr. Leonard Armato.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, we're talking about sports today, a very uncertain business model. And I've put behind me a background to remind everyone of what it's like when we can go to a game and have all that excitement surrounding us. You see LeBron James dunking in the NBA All-Star game last year. But on March 11th, the whole world changed when Rudy Gobert tested positive for COVID-19 and Adam Silver suspended the NBA season, and all the other sports followed suit. And since then, we have been in tumultuous times. So much of the sports industry has been affected. The hospitality industry that surrounds sports has been shut down. Essential workers have been devastated, concessionaires, ticket takers, everyone else. In an effort to salvage the 2020 season, sports returned in modified form, all on TV at the same time, competing for attention. And then we're faced not only with the pandemic, but social unrest. The ratings go down, people are asking why, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Will people return to sports? Will they change their habits? Are they going to continue to watch? How are sports going to be affected going forward into the future? I'm really honored to be surrounded by this incredible group of people, some of the most respected, experienced people in the sports industry. And I'm going to introduce my panel members. First, Randy Freer, former CEO of Hulu, named by Business Insider as one of the 100 most influential people in business. He was president of Fox Network Group, president of Fox Sports, and twice named the most powerful person in sports by the Sports Business Journal. Next, I want to introduce David Katz, executive VP and head of digital at Fox Sports. He's a pioneer in the digital sports world. Little known fact, David said streaming is going to be big in sports, and he took the NCAA tournament March Madness and put it on CBS streaming, and people thought he was crazy. Well, they don't call him crazy anymore. He was the head of Yahoo Sports and also started a sports content company, the Post Game. Next, I want to introduce Ed Desser. He ran NBA media for 23 years under David Stern. Post-NBA, he started Desser Media and represented one of the biggest rights holders out there, like the Los Angeles Lakers in their groundbreaking deal with Time Warner Cable. Ed also does expert witness testimony, and he was the expert witness in the O'Bannon case against the NCAA, and is a published author, and actually writes with the next guy I'm going to introduce, John Kozner, who ran ESPN Digital for 17 years after stints at SI and CBS Sports. He kind of ushered in the era of the proliferation of sports content and expanded the ecosystem of sports content, hiring people like Bill Simmons. Okay, Amy Brooks, and I'm going to talk about Amy because I love her title. She's got the longest title in the world, and I love her title. The president of NBA Business and Team Operations and Chief Innovations Officer of the NBA. And I asked Amy, why is your title so long? And she said, when Adam Silver gives you a title, you don't argue with him. And so I agree with you, Amy, you don't argue with him. And you have been lauded and honored as one of the most powerful women in sports. So it's wonderful to have you here today with us. And thank you for joining us. So can I start with the first question? And I'd like to take that first question and give it to Randy Freer. Randy, you've seen a lot of change during this pandemic period. What are the most dramatic changes? And will those changes last? And have you seen any innovation you'd like to bring to people's attention?
Look, I think there has been a lot of change. I think most of what has been changing is in the infrastructure, remote production, all the things that people have had to do to get through the day-to-day of putting events on, inside of this window. I haven't actually seen something that I go, wow, that's spectacular, and that'll move on to the next thing. But I do believe that the best innovation that can come out of this is thought process. I think this window of time has given people the freedom and the ability to think about what is next, or think about doing something different than they have historically done. And what I hope is people will continue to think that way and think more about 2025 than 2021. And I think that's where the real innovation that'll affect the customer, the consumer, will come from, versus in today's window of time where so much of it has just simply been about, how do I put events on today? How do I get remote production up and running? What do I do, to make sure that we can get through a season?
Interesting. And I was informed that I cut out before I was able to introduce Christopher Dempsey. And Chris is an award-winning journalist who resides in Boulder, Colorado, covered football, basketball, the NCAA. But what he's really settled on is how much he loves covering the Denver Nuggets and NBA basketball. And Chris has obviously been a witness to the way that journalists and athletes have changed their relationship during this pandemic period. So Chris, you're going to be talking about that quite a bit. And if you want to chime in right now, since I got you, you can add to what Randy had to say about changes you've seen and innovations that you think have come to the forefront.
Well, first of all, it's I'm very happy to be here with all of you. So I really do appreciate the opportunity. I think, for me, the innovations kind of all have come in this kind of a space. How are teams and people and how are they meeting? How are they communicating with each other when you can't be with each other? And for us at the Altitude Sports, and I work at Altitude Sports, and we've done some interesting things in terms of some of our broadcasts. Even when the NBA restarted, we did basically a Zoom call of games, the scrimmage games, which was actually kind of cool. So it was, four of us at the top of a screen calling a game prior to the actual seeding games. And so I think to Randy's point in terms of thinking outside of the box and thinking of creative new ways to communicate with each other and with our audiences, I think this will be invaluable. I think from the standpoint of, honestly, game operations, I think is going to benefit the most at the end of the day, with the way that some of these innovations can now connect them with fans and give fans even a better, maybe in-game experience at arenas and stadiums than maybe they previously had.
Well, Amy, you're obviously innovation is in your title. Are you seeing some innovations that have spawned from this, terrible challenge that we've all been faced with that the NBA has been put into practice?
Yeah, I think, first off, thank you for having me. Good to see everyone. And I think Randy and Christopher put it very well. This has just pushed the pace of all the things I think we knew we needed to get towards anyway. And we were very grateful to have finished our season safely, and are proud of some of the innovations that we just scrapped together on a very tight timeline. One of which, if you're watching NBA games, you saw our virtual fans, which we've partnered with Microsoft Teams. And we talked for years. We know that 99% of NBA fans can never come to a game just because of our global fan base. And we got 60,000 people in there virtually, and some celebrities. We even had one goat. There was a goat. Yes, that was a fun project of what's allowed in the virtual fan room compared to what's allowed in arenas. So there was some comedy along the way, but that's a technology that I think is just indicative of where we need to go to really bridge the broadcast product and the media product along with the in-person product, even though we couldn't unfortunately have our fans live in person this season.
Yeah, really interesting. And David, what about over at Fox? Are you seeing any innovation that has been particularly exciting from your standpoint?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on something that Randy was saying, because Randy was talking a lot about remote production. And, pre-pandemic, you really had digital production and then you had television production. And those worlds intersected events, but never really intersected in terms of production itself. And when we got word that our talent and our producers were not allowed in Building 101, a building I know Randy knows very well, were not allowed in the building because of COVID, and some of the most important voices in sports that are airing on FS1 were not able to actually be heard at that time. That's when digital raised their hand and partnered with television and said, all the things that we're good at from a digital perspective, we're used to producing live events, in very under duress, under very difficult circumstances with poor Wi-Fi and bad lighting and no hair and makeup with our talent. And we're used to getting stuff, quote unquote, on air. And that experience really paved the way for getting the network back on air for many months before we were allowed back in that building. So our team of remote production experts from a digital standpoint partnered with our TV counterparts, and we were able to deliver over 800 hours of live television through our technical director's garage in Santa Monica. So things you would never have thought possible ended up being possible. And I think some of the changes you'll see going forward is what's really important is paying someone to fly cross country, to get hair and makeup, to sit in a chair for an hour to appear on a television show, as important as getting some of this talent remotely, safely involved in these shows. So there's a lot of lessons learned and a lot I think that we'll be able to carry forward into the future.
So John, you know, all the things you did to sort of set up ESPN's digital future, do any of the things that are happening now surprise you, or all of these things recommendations you made a number of years ago?
No, I mean, as Amy said, I was just super impressed by the technical achievement of what went on in the NBA bubble. That's just one example. And you have situations like now where experimentation becomes necessary, not a risk. So for instance, the play-in tournament at the NBA bubble was fantastic. The Suns went undefeated. The Portland, New Jersey Nets, the Portland, Brooklyn Nets game was unbelievable, setting up a play-in tournament to get in the playoffs. These are things that people and fans had talked about, but had never happened before. And the virus, the bubble provided the venue to try that. And now I think we're just not going back. David Katz makes the point about the connection between digital and TV production. That always should have happened. Some entities were able to do more of that than less, but we're not going back. What I find interesting is the precedents and lessons we learned, what's going to sort of follow us through. For instance, travel. You saw the high quality of play at the bubble. I suspect that when we come out and have the next set of seasons, all the leagues are going to look at travel differently. Should the Lakers go to Denver 2 or 3 times a year, or should they go one time and play a couple of games? It's always been the former, but I think that's going to be rethought going forward. You know, as David said, the choice between traveling people or what decisions you make may create more value for experts in local markets that could then work with different entities. So I think out of necessity, a lot of things emerged here, but many I think are going to be part of the permanent solution.
Yeah, and Ed, Amy talked about what the NBA is doing, and you're sort of the father of the NBA's thinking from a media perspective. Did anything surprise you, or were these things that you were recommending for years and only finally it took the pandemic to get them implemented?
I wish I could claim that I'd come up with all of these ideas early on. I mean, we got a lot of credit in my NBA days for taking advantage of new opportunities that kind of the technology world created, and we were just open to trying. So, Zoom or the Microsoft Teams product was never available to us back in those days. So there was not much we could do. But we started innovations that in my days represented things like NBA League Pass, taking advantage of a huge amount of new capacity. Taking advantage of the internet. It was, there was a time, believe it or not, when the internet was sort of rolling out and no one really knew what you were going to do with it. And it was like, well, we could probably sell some merchandise. Maybe one day we'll sell tickets. There was a time when people were really afraid of using their credit cards. Online, obviously Amazon has dispelled with any of that concern. But I will say the NBA has always been, I think, a thought leader in terms of being open to trying new things. And of course, it always has to be balanced because, you know, you've got a big business that you're trying to support, and you don't want to do anything to undermine the values that you're currently creating, whether it be, you know, from the team perspective or the league perspective or the international perspective. Yes, having the opportunity to try things like the bubble and play in differently, or, you know, produce the games differently. You know, the camera tracking along the baseline. I'm sorry, not the baseline, the sideline. The different angles, you know, above the free throw line extended. The opportunity to superimpose various things on the floor as opposed to paint them. These are all things that hadn't really been done, or at least weren't being done regularly in NBA games, and it sort of opened the opportunity. So I for one am thrilled that Amy has accepted the mantle and is continuing to run around the track, doing new innovations. It's the thing that I most enjoyed about my time at the NBA, and it's really exciting for me to watch. I do think, as a final thought, and this goes to one of the things that David and John mentioned, I think that the history of television production has been that we constantly add new things. You know, there probably are people on this call that don't remember that in the early days of instant replay, the total capacity of the replay discs that were used was about 22 seconds. So if you wanted to replay something from, you know, the previous quarter, it was gone forever. So we're now seeing an attempt to rethink the way games are producing it with fewer people, producing it with less in the way of facilities, and making multiple use. Randy was doing that to a certain extent when he was at Fox, when they recognized driving two trucks into an arena and producing two separate feeds with a lot of redundancy doesn't make sense. So let's create a double feed truck. Well, the NBA took that to the next level, and I suspect that going into the future, you know, there's easily $100 million of potential savings that will be material, you know, as revenues are going to be constrained going forward. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see more of that ingenuity and innovation going forward.
Well, yeah, that's a great comment, Ed. And you mentioned Amy and revenues being lost, and, you know, Amy sits there and looks at all those teams that she's helping to maximize revenue, and for the most part, they haven't had any in the recent past. You know, it's been widely reported that 40% of the NBA revenue comes from live events and arenas and local. And, you know, Amy, what does the future business model look like? Are you going to be able to capture that revenue in the future? Are you going to be able to expand on it? What the heck are you doing over there?
Not a lot going on, right? Now, listen, it's interesting, Ed, hearing from you of how far and how quickly we've come. But at the end of the day, it's delivering a great entertainment product to our fans. And the two ways to do that, one is call it broadcast, call it TV, call it streaming, call it whatever you want. But one is in the arena and one is outside the arena. And so no doubt, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone on this panel that we've taken a hit on the in-arena side. But again, to the theme of what we've all been talking about, can this pandemic make us innovate more quickly to come out of this even stronger and to have a fantastic live product? You know, we see our arenas as the town halls of our community, and it is about community gathering, but of course it's about entertainment, watching the game. But we have to recognize that there's some trade-offs that go along with an in-arena viewer and a television or broadcast viewer. And, you know, for example, it may be, you know, it's nice to have breaks and be able to enjoy the beautiful clubs and scenes and talk to people in the arena. And it might be better for our broadcast to have shorter, tighter games. So those are the types of trade-offs I think we have to all consider as an ecosystem, not just for the NBA product, but for all entertainment products going forward. But we're certainly focused on that. And I want to reiterate something I said about the virtual fans. Like, all of this makes, already we're looking at game presentation and exactly, how our fans are entertained in the building. We're going to have to double down and spending time on that, because the bar is going to be higher. There are more viewing options today. I mean, every minute there's a new different show and streaming provider, like much different than it used to be. And so we're going to have to compete to be the best entertainment product, both consumed via broadcast as well as going to the actual arena.
Amy, just really quick follow-up, do you think that people coming to arenas and watching games live will then have the effect of elevating the television ratings and getting people more excited about viewing as well?
Well, it's certainly a part of it. You watch a game and you want to be excited when your team scores. You want to jump up and down. You want to cheer with your friends when you're watching. And I do think that the environment in a building makes you want to do that more when you see 10,000 people, 20,000 people on their feet doing the same thing. And of course, we try to do our best with virtual fans this season, but nothing replaces a packed building of fans. And that's what our business is built around.
So Randy, I want you to chime in here because you've had so much experience on the business side of sport. Do you see people's habits shifting back to attending games in mass numbers, or what do you think the foreseeable future will look like in terms of live events, people attending, and how that affects their desire to watch on TV? And are big sports different than little sports?
Well, Leonard, I wish I had an answer to that. I don't think any amount of experience or longevity in this business, it really has prepared any of us to be able to project what might happen. I think ultimately, like everything in life, you're going to have a certain percentage of the people who can't wait to get back into an arena setting or into an event or a movie theater or whatever it might be. And you're going to have a certain percentage of people who will never go again. And then there's everyone in between. So, I think it's hard to predict what an in-game or an in-arena element is going to look like versus what things might look like on television. I do believe that one of the things that we all can do a better job of, that we should do a better job of, is we should really pay attention to the data and really pay attention to, the new types of information we're getting. One of the innovations I think that everyone will either ignore or downplay or do something differently is we all know that regular seasons across all sports are too long. Whether it's 80 games for the NBA and hockey or 160 games for, baseball or 62, that regular season has elongated to a point where it becomes somewhat ridiculous. And I think this window of time where we've had to shorten everything, where the leagues have done a really good job of figuring out ways to do interesting things, whether it's the play-in game for the playoffs or some of the other things, expanding the playoffs. I think those are ways to really think about what the fan wants and what the consumer wants versus focusing, more on the business needs in order to support certain things. That's why I believe the thought process of really moving to the future faster in this way and having the freedom to do that and not go backwards, not go back to the pre-pandemic policies and operational views. Use that remote production, all the innovation that's come from Zoom and how we communicate with each other to really put the fan first and try and develop new ways to do that. And the end of your question, Leonard, I'm not sure it makes a difference of big event versus small event, because small events are, have passionate fans as well, whether that's some of the new lacrosse leagues coming out or some of the other products that are out there. They have passionate fans as well. And as long as you have passionate fans, I think you're going to have the opportunity to bring them a great product and please them. And again, I am hoping that we take, what has been this, 6 or 7 months of chaos and take the best of what we've been able to achieve in that process and move much, much quicker to what the future of all of these opportunities look like, or we're going to continue down a path of losing generations of fans as people age.
David, over at Fox, what are you seeing now in terms of the way that your group on the digital side works with the linear side on the ratings piece, and how you can help affect that in a positive way, and how can you activate fans in a more powerful way through the use of the tools that you're developing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to jump on what Amy and Randy said. I've spoken to a lot of people in the ticketing business, and they believe that it's really about whether the local municipality will let you into the stadiums, and at some point when it's safe, they will. But they believe that there is plenty of demand to fill the stadiums and fill the seats. And if the Lakers were playing at home in the NBA Finals, even with all this going on, you'd find 20,000 fans who are interested in being in that arena if they were allowed to be in that arena. So hopefully a hopeful view towards the future. And over the last month, I've actually been able to attend 2 live events that had no fans in person. I went to the Chiefs-Ravens game, and I went to the Preakness Stakes. And I don't think the leagues and the players are getting enough credit for what they are able to put on today with no fans in the arena. Because when you sit there at this NFL game, there is no energy inside this stadium. You realize how important the fans are to the experience, and credit to these players to be able to play at the high level that they're playing as consistently as they are without the energy provided by fans for what is effectively a TV product. It's like theater being just played with no sound and no feedback. So credit to all of them. And as it relates to what we can do on the digital side to make these events more compelling, we relaunched the Fox Sports app and website with an eye towards doing these types of things. Now, we envisioned this before the pandemic, but the goal was, how do we give fans an opportunity to get closer to the action? So if you were to watch the World Series game this evening, you'll be able to go in, watch the telecast in the main feed, and have bonus cameras that can be consumed all while the live game is going on. You can watch the all-9 camera. You can watch various bullpen cams. You can watch the aerial cams, which seem to be catching all the amazing Mookie Betts catches at the fence, and giving fans the opportunity to see that, control it, get higher levels of engagement, and to be able to see that while getting social feeds, while getting live stats, while getting odds. We haven't spoken about gambling, but that's obviously something that we all have our eyes on for the future. All of those products coming together to support the live game feed, I think, are the things that will keep fans engaged when they're sitting at home or not in front of the game themselves.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And the 2 wise sages of media, John and Ed, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And guys, just chime in whenever you want, but just let us know what you think the future looks like there as well.
You're muted, John.
Apologize. Just say something real quick, which is that the industry's biggest opportunity is also the biggest challenge, which is young fans. It's a generation of fans who are coming up who have almost unlimited entertainment options. Amy talked about subscription video on demand, but there's also unlimited supply of free content that comes from YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, other places. This is a video games generation, and sports is going to have to work really, really hard to engage this audience and to convince them to pay. It was a foregone conclusion in my lifetime that we wanted pay television so we could watch the games. This is now all up for grabs. And while I'm optimistic that sports can do the things and is unique, it's the town hall, as Amy said, there's a lot of work to be done, and it's not a given for the first time in our careers. So there's a ton of work to be done in a competitive environment, unlike any that we have experienced in our careers.
What do you think, Ed?
Yeah, I agree with John. I think it's a very, very interesting time. It does open the door for trying new things, which we talked about earlier with Amy. The reality is that we're in the midst of this sea change where the financial underpinnings of the business that John just described, the pay TV business, is now under assault. And what had been a 90% penetration of households is now in the 70s, and so cable doesn't necessarily get you maximum distribution of your product. So now we're talking about, with all of these various SVOD bundles, a whole series of new opportunities, and it's almost the new balkanization of the entertainment business. So CBS is now going to rebrand All Access Paramount Plus. So we've got HBO Max, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, etc. And over and above Netflix and Amazon. So you can see a world where there may be two parallel universes. One which is sort of the old media that still has legacy rights to the most important content, whether it be regional or national. And then you've got, all of these new platforms, which are, are going to be under tremendous pressure to grow and competing with one another. And one of the best ways historically to compete and differentiate yourself, this is true in the cable business, and it will be true in streaming as well, is carrying live sports that is topical, is emotional, is differentiated. That's going to be yet another slice of the salami, as our old friend and mentor David Stern used to say. We're going to see a whole new wave of competition. And on the one hand, the pay TV universe and the dollars that are in those pots aren't growing like they used to be. And on the other hand, all of these new businesses as startups have investment capital and the benefit of the lifetime value of the subscriber to justify maybe paying more than the direct revenue that they're going to receive from new subscribers in the first year of their being on the platform.
Wow, yeah, that's a great point. And I wanted to ask Christopher something which is sort of a little different, but it's something that's on everybody's mind and everyone's talking about, and there's a lot of different opinions on it. But during the pandemic, there's been a tremendous social justice movement that's emerged. And did the pandemic accelerate it? And then there's a question about the roles of sports teams and leagues and players in social justice. And of course, the risk that leagues and teams and players are going to be viewed more as political as opposed to purpose-driven. So talk about this a little bit, Christopher, from a journalist perspective. What do you see? And how do you see the role of teams and leagues in this whole movement?
Well, it's definitely evolving. I think, first of all, I think the pandemic did nothing to exacerbate the situation. I think it was there. What the NBA bubble did was it brought all the players to one spot. So you had the pandemic and you had social justice all sitting in Orlando, and they're talking to each other, and they're able to meet with each other, and then they're able to present a unified front to the public. But the social justice issues, I think, were spurred more by a group of young athletes who are no longer afraid to speak their minds, quite frankly, and do what they have to do without fear. Whether it be to pause a league the way they did with the NBA, regular season there in the bubble, or just get with the executives and leaders to form, the initiatives to help this. To help this cause. I don't think it's, listen, I know it's viewed as political. I think we're talking a little bit more about a human rights issue, and that's it's okay for everybody to be treated the same way. And I think the players want to be on board with that. And I think leagues like the NBA certainly obviously have been ahead in this, but this has been across the board. If you could, from Sprint to Coca-Cola to Nike to you can name them all. And I think so many people were on board. I don't think that overall, when we start looking at this, moving on into the future, I'll be interested to see how it develops and how much it continues to be at the forefront, and how the players continue to be pushing for this to be at the forefront, because they really are the ones who are helping spur this entire movement. And without them, them pushing so hard, then I think maybe some of the leagues wouldn't push as hard for themselves. But it's been in. I worked for the Denver Post for 14 years, and I had never seen athletes be this emboldened to feel that they are ready now to be able to affect change. And so I commend them. I mean, listen, I remember when I was 22, 23, 24, and that was a long time ago, and I could not have seen myself doing anything like this. But I think for those athletes in these leagues, I don't think it has to get away. I know there's a segment that says, well, this is getting away of TV ratings as well. I don't know what those numbers are. I don't know how much truth there is to that. But I do know at the end of the day, I think what people really do desire is these athletes to be their authentic selves, to present themselves that way on and off the field, on and off the court. And that's what they are getting now. And ultimately, I think this will be, everybody will benefit from what we are going through and what we have been through and what these athletes believe in and will fight for.
Yeah, you talk about that and what the athletes are emboldened to do. And it seems to me that there's been a little bit of a shift in the balance of power a bit, and that the athletes have now more power than they did, let's say 20, 15 years ago. And as a result, feel like they have the opportunity and are emboldened to take steps they otherwise wouldn't take. So do you think there's a little bit of that too, Christopher?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. LeBron James is as powerful an individual as you'll ever see. Individual, not just an athlete. And you have so many more that are like him across the leagues. And then not only that, but I think, do you need LeBron James and Chris Pauls and these guys to stand up? Yes, you do. But all the athletes, so many more athletes that are not minorities standing up as well, and standing beside their teammates and their friends and saying, hey, look, this is something that matters to us too. And that has really, that's helped the cause. But certainly when you have athletes that financially can affect change, that their voices have been as large as they've ever been in the history of athletics, that has been a big deal. Paul Millsap is a player here with the Denver Nuggets, and he owns a gym in Atlanta, and he just turned it into a voting center. Like that's something that just couldn't have happened, 25, 30 years ago. So
no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it's athletes' power certainly has helped here.
So we have about 8 more minutes left, and so what I want to do is go through each one of you and ask you to make a bold prediction about the future of sport in any way, shape, or form you like. I'd like to start by saying that we're in a time right now where there's tremendous polarization. And I think, maybe people don't want to watch sports because they feel it's too political. But I also believe that could change with different forms of communication among people. So my prediction is that we're going to get back to looking at what we believe in common, what core values we all embrace, rather than what disagreements we have and how we can draw ourselves further apart. A Republican and a Democrat should be able to sit together and watch an NBA, an NFL, or any other game and find those things that they have in common and values that they share and enjoy that sporting event And hopefully our country will get better and better as a result of that. And sports can get back to a place where everyone looks at it as a positive force in moving us in the right direction. So that's my prediction and my hope. And so I'll turn it over to you one by one. Randy, let's start with you because you were the first one to answer the first question. So let's lead with you for the last one. What's your bold prediction?
I'd rather we could reverse the order. That way I could just say I agree. I think as I said before, I think the more we can as an industry think about 2025 and what needs to happen in order to capture new generations of fans versus thinking about what we're going to do in 2021, the better we're going to be. So with that, I'll predict that there will be a new modern media platform that will be led by sports, with sports, that will be really focusing on the consumer, that will have interactivity, it will have social, it will have user generated, it will create a modern platform for younger fans to experience these incredible athletes in these sports in the way that they're used to and want to experience content.
We now know what Randy is planning to do in his next career.
All right, Ed. So since you chimed in, you go next. What's your bold prediction?
So I think that what we're looking at in the sports business is probably more in the way of micro consumption. And by that, I mean, with attention spans shrinking, with more of a more kind of video game as a normal way of consuming sports, with emphasis on highlights, League Pass selling you, a quarter of a game as opposed to 1,200 games. I think we're ushering in a new world where things are going to be purchased in bite-size fashion. You think about it, a season ticket. I mean, there's a sort of a bit of a throwback because teams were only too happy to take a bunch of their inventory and have it committed for a year at a time. Now with secondary ticketing, we've kind of turned that on its head, and so just think about. I'm not predicting that we're going to have fans showing up for a quarter of the game and selling the same seat multiple times for the same game. I'm not going there, but I am recognizing that tastes are changing, that young people don't have endless patience, and I think that wherever you can adopt the iTunes model of selling a song at a time as opposed to the whole album, sports will be able to be more successful in coming years.
That's that agreed. And Amy, what do you think from the NBA standpoint and the way that the future will unfold, in your world?
Yeah, let me build on something Ed said, because I think it's important. I think it's bridging, this notion of a season ticket with the notion of the world of microtransactions and personalization that's coming. And, we look at our business, and the season ticket is not dead when it comes to the arena product. In fact, we have more season ticket holders over the last 5 years in the NBA than we've ever had. That said, the bar is being raised, both on broadcast as well as in arena. And people want to feel like they're behind the scenes part of the team. And we have to continue to innovate in that space to make them feel that way. And of course, people come to games for different reasons. We have to personalize our approach to whether it's a business or it's a family or it's a super fan and all of those segmentation. We just have to get better with data, both in arena and on broadcast. And I see, it's not as much a prediction as a hope. Like, I hope we can get to the point where there is a global season ticket. You saw us start with our virtual fans, right? But whether you're a fan of Giannis who lives in Greece or you're a fan of Giannis who lives in Milwaukee, can we deliver a killer experience to that person that makes them feel like they're behind the scenes, watching the Milwaukee Bucks, watching their favorite player, part of the community, can invite their friends easily? Like, that's where going, and that's where I'm hopeful we can get to sooner than later.
Oh, I think Leonard froze.
Leonard likes my comments so much, he froze.
Yeah.
Then I need to hand the baton to you, John.
So the head of product at Spotify is named Gustav Soderstrom, and he has an expression called algo editorial. And the idea is that the best organizations, and I think his is one, combine really brilliant people with brilliant computer programs. And they figure out of the utilization of data and super smart people, what direction to go and decisions to make. So if you take a look at companies that really embrace their own sort of digital transformation, Starbucks is one, the NBA is another, and you see how well they're performing right now versus others. I think that's what we're looking at as we move into the future. Like, who's going to do a really good job of the user experience? And those companies, Netflix is one, Apple, Amazon, that have done a really good job. They're commanding more and more share. The top entities in sports are going to do the same thing. And I would submit that the magic isn't just the data or just having super smart people. It's the combination of super smart people embracing the data and really communicating well with each other. And then I think, to Amy's point, creating that sense of personalization and connection that enables you to sell different things to different fans, but have everybody benefit from that incredible community connection we get out of sports. I was going to pass to Christopher.
All right. So much good stuff. Yeah. Welcome back.
I'm back at the All-Star game.
I'm going to take this. We didn't touch on media, and just in terms of relationship, how will players' stories be told? And, I think the pandemic, the one thing it really killed was the ability of media to tell players' stories, because you couldn't, if you were in the NBA, you couldn't go into that bubble for the most part. And tell the stories locally. If you're an RSN, if you're a newspaper guy, which I was for many, many years, I think the relationships with organizations, players, media is changed, and I think it's changed forever. I can see more Zoom, which it's been a gift and a curse. The curse is you have general Zoom press conferences. They last 5 to 7 minutes. You get whatever you get out of it. There is no more personal contact between a reporter and a player. There can be no more relationship building between that reporter and a player, which then really does impact what the product can be in terms of how you are disseminating just content to fans. How close can you really be to these players? I think on the flip side, Teams and Zoom, they've allowed you to get to people that you couldn't get to before, because they don't have to be anywhere but in their living room. And I think, it's going to open up doors from a standpoint of, okay, I can get to some people I couldn't get to before, but to get behind the curtain and understand more about these players. Yes, they have their own personal platforms, and yes, the leagues, and I think teams, I work for the Nuggets, we have our own personal platforms to be able to get to players and get some of that information out to fans. But I think it's that relationship is hurt forever, and it's going to take a lot more work for us to be able to tell the stories in the way I think they have been told and the way they should be told in the future.
Well, thank you. And I think we're at the end of our time. And I just wanted to thank all of you for joining today. I learned a lot just listening, and it's always exciting to see friends and always exciting to see people that I don't get to see in person, but get to learn from and hear from. And I know everyone out there loved it. I got kicked off, and I was told when I got kicked off that this was an amazing panel and the response was incredible. So thank you again, everyone. And
Leonard, we have to give David Katz 30 seconds for his prediction.
Oh, David didn't get it. Go, David. Go.
Digital guys always last. So 20 years ago, it was about getting video to work on this new thing called the internet. And then you go back 10 to 15 years ago, and this new wave of digital sports was about social media. What was the impact that these social media platforms were going to have on the consumption of sports and the delivery of sports and how to find fans? And I think we're entering kind of what I call the third wave of the digital sports experience. And it's akin to what Randy was talking about with interactivity, but I'll say more specifically, I think it is gambling. And I think that represents the next 10-year growth wave for this industry, and a way to gamify the sports, a way to get fans, especially younger fans, more interested in it. I don't think it's going to be all the traditional, just bet the spread, bet the money line. I think you're going to see a ton of innovation that engages fans in different ways. And I think the ultimate beneficiaries are going to be the networks, the leagues, the teams, the players, who are going to find fans at a completely different level of engagement.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And again, thanks to everybody for joining. And this has been not only informative, but a lot of fun as well. So good to see everybody. Thank you again, and hope to see you soon in person. Hi, Brandy.
Thanks, Leonard.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much to our panel moderator, Leonard Armato, and thank you so much to our distinguished panel members for taking the time to share your thoughts with us today on the current state and the future of sports.